Well, hello, friends. I am Pastor Michelle coming at you on this Saturday night, January 24th. The snow has started to fall, so I'm not sure when you're watching this video, but I pray that you are safe and that you are warm. And so, my friends, I wanted to go ahead and record my sermon, but also record a little extra because I know that we are not having church on the Sunday after I record this on January 25th. So I wanted to just lift up a few things that we would have done today. Today we would have welcomed in like 6 or 7 new members. And so in light of that, I just wanted to take a moment. One of my favorite kids' books is called The Family Book. And I wanted to share with you this book because when we welcome in new members, it's like welcoming in new people for our church family, right? And to be clear, you don't have to become a covenant member to be part of the family here at Harmony Creek Church. You are part of the family the moment that you walk through the doors. So I thought I would share this book about families. So this is called The Family Book. So some families are big and some families are small. Some families are the same color, while some families are different colors. All families like to hug each other. Some families live near each other, some families live far from each other. And that family lives very far from each other, a whole other planet. Some families look alike, some families look like their pets. All families are sad when they lose someone they love, which is true. Some families have a stepmom or stepdad and stepsisters or stepbrothers. Some families adopt children. Some families have 2 moms or 2 dads. Some families have 1 parent instead of 2. All families like to celebrate special days together. The person's 100 years old. Some families eat the same things. Some families eat different things. Some families like to be quiet, while some families like to be noisy. Some families like to be clean, while some families like to be messy. Some families live in a house by themselves, while some families share a house with other families. All families can help each other be strong. There are lots of different ways to be a family. Your family is special no matter what kind it is. Love, Todd, who wrote this book. And so that's a reminder, friends, that we are gaining new members for our community here at Harmony. Ted Elsbroth is going to be joining. Ted, who is our music leader, he's going to officially be he's officially one of our members. Victoria, Reverend Victoria, Ethan and Susie, Emily, Sue, and Jessica, my fiance. So they're all official members of the church now. And so we are so grateful that they have decided to become a covenant member of our church. And so today, I just wanted to lift that up. But today our scripture reading comes from Matthew 5, verses 38 through 48. And today my topic comes to you by Laurel Kerr. So this is the last of my You Paid For It sermons. And today's topic Laurel Kerr wanted me to preach on how the phrases turn the other cheek, go the extra mile, give of your cloak. Those are not actually passive things to say to someone. They're actually really, as the bulletins say, they're very defiant. And so we're going to explore that. But first, let's hear the scripture reading from Matthew. You've heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, give your coat as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go along the 2nd mile. Give to the one who asks of you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, okay, I'm actually not going to read that part because the most important part is for Matthew 8. I'm realizing I probably included too much of the scripture. Next week, actually, for my sermon, I'll be preaching on the Beatitudes. So we're going to talk a lot about blessed are they. Blessed are the least of these. So let's dive right into this, shall we? So our scripture reading, a lot of my inspiration for this sermon, comes from Walter Wink, and he talks about Jesus and nonviolence, a third way, which this is going to tie into last week a little. And actually, it ties in we're going to talk about nonviolent resistance, something that Martin Luther King Jr. really advocated for, and something that Jesus lived out. So Jesus really showed us how to be a nonviolent resistor, right? So in this passage, we have those three examples that Jesus gives, right? He talks about turning the other cheek, give your cloak also, and go the extra mile, which I talk about going the extra mile all the time. But doing research, it's interesting to find out what these phrases actually mean. So Laurel, I just want to say to you, thank you for giving me this topic because I've learned a lot through this. So the thing is, Walter Wink talks about this in his book, and I'm going to talk about this book a lot throughout my sermon. But these verses have been mistranslated and misused over the years to make us to sound like instructions on how to be a Christian doormat. If someone goes to slap you, well, turn the other cheek so they can just slap you again. If someone takes something of yours, just give them all of your stuff. If someone go the extra mile, even for those people that may not be treating you right. It's like these verses have been used in very negative ways, just like the Bible as a whole, right? The Bible is not supposed to be a weapon, but yet when it's mistranslated, when people misunderstand what the context, when they don't research what is going on as context and everything in the Bible, sometimes they can misinterpret these verses and use them more as a weapon. And these verses, yeah, they do. They sound like instructions on how to be a doormat. It's like we hear Jesus telling his followers, just take it, just stay quiet, let people hurt you. But that's not what Jesus is doing at all. And it is so painful. It's painful that these verses continue to be misused, especially against women, against abused people. I have heard people say to women who are in abusive marriages or to men in abusive marriages that you just have to take it and you should stay in the marriage even if you're getting abused. How scary to misuse the Bible in that way. These verses have been misused against marginalized communities, basically telling them that faith means enduring harm. And I even remember being told that faith means enduring harm when I was struggling with my sexual identity, when I was going through conversion therapy. I was told to harm myself over and over again because that's what faith means. Faith means carrying your cross, and carrying my cross meant hurting myself over and over again. But the thing is, let's remember that is not what Jesus is doing here. When Jesus says turn the other cheek, when Jesus says give your cloak also, when Jesus says go the extra mile, it's not even close to what Jesus is implying. The thing is, Jesus is not calling us to passivity. He's not calling us to silence. He's calling us to surrender our dignity. What Jesus is doing in Matthew 5 is Jesus. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that because I have misreading my manuscript. Jesus is not calling us to passivity. He's not calling us to silence, and he's not calling us to surrender our dignity and to be a doormat. In the face of harm, we're not called to just take more harm. What Jesus is doing in Matthew 5, what he's telling his listeners is far more dangerous than that. And this is kind of leading into the Sermon on the Mount, I believe. But Jesus is teaching us resistance language. Jesus is teaching us resistance. Now, Walter Wink, he talks about this in his book, that We are taught two ways to respond to harm. And when someone is trying to harm us, what are the two ways? Fight or flight, right? But Walter Wink, he says that there's another way. It's not just fight or flight. There's a third way. And that third way, as he talks about in his book, is nonviolent resistance. And he quotes, Jesus is not advocating submission to evil. He's offering ways to seize the moral initiative and expose injustice, end quote. So let's think about these three expressions, though, and see why they're actually more defiant than they sound. So in Jesus' time, a slap wasn't just about injury. A slap was about humiliation. I still remember one of my favorite shows is How I Met Your Mother, and they do this thing called Slap Bet, and Barney gets slapped a lot, one of the characters. It's not really pertaining to the sermon, but I just wanted to share that. So anyway, a slap wasn't about injury. It was about humiliation. So a master, let's say a master over a slave, would strike a servant with the back of the right hand, because it was a way of saying to the servant, you're beneath me. And this is something to remember. Back in Jesus' day, you could not strike someone with your left hand because your left hand was considered unclean. And so when Jesus says, turn the other cheek, he's not actually saying, let him just hit you again. No, that's not what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, stand up and force them to see you as an equal. Because because Wink talks about it in his book, but I'm sorry, I should have had it right there, but because it changes everything. Because you can't use the other hand, right? It would be an awkward slap because you have to use the other side of your hand, and you can't if he hits you with, the person who turns the other cheek is saying, the person who turns the other cheek is saying, in effect, try again, your first blow failed to achieve its intended effect. I deny you the power to humiliate me. I'm a human being just like you. Your status does not alter that fact. You cannot demean me. And I love this, because such a response would create enormous difficulties for the striker. Purely logically, what can he do? He can't use the backhand because his nose is in the way, the person's nose, right? He can't use his left hand. If he makes a fist, if he hits with a fist, he makes himself an equal, acknowledging the other as a peer. But the whole point of the back of the hand is to reinforce the caste system, and it's institutionalized inequality. Even if he orders the person flogged, the point has become irrevocably made. The oppressor has been forced against his will to regard this subordinate as an equal human being. The powerful person has been stripped of his power to dehumanize the other. This response, far from admonishing passivity and cowardice, is an act of defiance. End quote. So that's directly from this. So, it's turning the other cheek removes the power of humiliation. And it says, you don't get to define my worth. That is what you are saying to your oppressor when you say that. So it's not weakness, it's defiance. Now, I love the cloak one. The cloak example is very interesting. Jesus goes further, says, if someone takes your coat, give them your cloak too. And for the poor in Jesus' time, the cloak was often the very last thing they owned. And so giving it meant essentially standing there naked, okay? And here's the twist. In that culture, nakedness didn't shame the poor. It shamed the one who caused it. And so so Jesus is essentially saying, expose the injustice, let the system show itself for what it is. And that, my friends, is prophetic protest. This is creative resistance at its core. Just get naked. And Walter Wink goes on to say, only the poorest of the poor would have nothing but an outer garment to give as collateral for a loan. So Jewish law strictly required its return. It its return every evening at sunset, for that was all the poor had to sleep, in which to sleep. So the situation to which Jesus alludes is one with which all his hearers would have been all too familiar. The poor debtor has sunk ever deeper into poverty. The debt cannot be repaid, and his creditor has hauled him into court to try to seize his property by legal means. Indebtedness was the most serious social problem in first century Palestine. And so essentially, why then does Jesus counsel them to give over their inner garment as well? This would mean stripping off all their clothing and marching out of court stark naked. So put yourself in the debtor's place and imagine the chuckles this saying must have evoked. There stands the creditor, beet red with embarrassment, your outer garment in one hand, your underwear in the other. You've suddenly turned the tables on him. You had no hope of winning the trial. The law was entirely in his favor. But you have refused to be humiliated, and at the same time, you have registered a stunning protest against a system that spawns such debt. You have said in effect, you want my robe? Here, take everything. Now you've got all I have except my body. Is that what you'll take next? And I love this, that Wink says Jesus in effect is sponsoring clowning. And so doing, he carries on a venerable tradition in Judaism. As a later saying of the Talmud, which is a Jewish writing, if your neighbor calls you an ass, put a saddle on your back. I love it. And so, here is a poor man who will no longer be treated as a sponge to be squeezed dry by the rich. He accepts the laws as they stand, pushes them to the point of absurdity, and reveals them for what they really are. He strips nude, walks out before his compatriots, and leaves the creditors and whole economic edifice he represents stark naked. And so it's a very interesting one, the cloak one. So now the next one is the going the extra mile. So back in Jesus' time, Roman soldiers could force Jewish citizens to carry their gear, but they were only able to force them to go 1 mile. If a soldier, and here's the point, if a soldier made someone go farther, the soldier could be punished. So when Jesus says go the 2nd mile, he's not talking about being nice. He's talking about flipping the script. Because suddenly the soldier is nervous, right? The power shifts. Suddenly oppression is exposed. Because Jesus is not passive. He's freaking brilliant, right? He's dismantling empire without picking up a sword. Nonviolent resistance at his core. And just speaking to you from Walter Winks, right? So the one about going the 2nd mile is drawn from a very enlightened practice of limiting the amount of forced labor that Roman soldiers could levy on subject peoples. Jews would have seldom encountered legionnaires except in time of war or insurrection. It would have been auxiliaries who were headquartered in Judea, paid at half the rate of legionnaires and rather a scruffy bunch. In Galilee, Herod Antipas maintained an army patterned after Rome's. Presumably, it also had the right to impose labor. So mile markers were placed regularly beside the highways, so a soldier could impress a civilian to carry his pack 1 mile only. To force the civilian to go farther carried with it severe penalties under military law. In this way, Rome attempted to limit the anger of the occupied people and still keep its armies on the move. So nevertheless, this levy was a bitter reminder to the Jews that they were a subject people even in the Promised Land. And so it's interesting. Imagine, from a situation of servile impressments, you have once more seized the initiative. When you say go the extra mile, you've taken back the power of choice. The soldier is thrown off balance by being deprived of the predictability of your response. Perhaps he's never dealt with a problem like that before, right? And so, imagine then the soldier's surprise when you're going that mile. At the next mile marker, he reluctantly reaches to assume his pack, and you say, "No, let me carry it another mile." Why would you do that? What are you up to? Normally, he has to coerce his kinsman to carry his pack, and now you do it and will not stop. Is this a provocation? Are you insulting his strength, being kind, trying to get him disciplined for seeming to make you go further? Are you trying to create problems? I mean, it would have really thrown everything off. Um, and so this is, it's another example of flipping the script. And so, and as Walter Wink says, these three examples, the turning the other cheek, going the second mile, and giving your cloak, they amplify what Jesus means in his thesis statement. Don't react violently against the one who is evil. Instead, the two options ingrained in us by millions of years of unreflected brute response to biological threats from the environment, fight or flight, Jesus offers a third way. This new way marks a historic mutation in human development, the revolt against the principle of natural selection. With Jesus, a way emerges by which evil can be opposed without being mirrored. And I love that. Evil can be opposed without being mirrored. And so there you have it, like the third way. And so this is where we've talked about the three ways, and I want to talk about a movie because I do love to use movies in my sermons. So I want to talk about one of my favorite movies that not everyone may have heard of, but it's called Joe Somebody. So on the surface, it's a goofy early 2000s comedy movie starring the Tim Allen. I don't know why I had to say the. But underneath it, I think the movie offers up a parable about the third way. The third way that Walter Wink talks about, the third way of non-violence resistance. You see Joe, the main character, is an ordinary guy. He is invisible, overlooked at work. And also at work, he's constantly bullied by a louder, more powerful coworker. So one day, in the parking lot in front of Joe's daughter, and in front of a lot of Joe's coworkers, the bully slaps him across the face. And so Joe feels humiliated, especially since this happened in front of his daughter. So what does Joe do? He does what our culture tells us to do, right? He decides in this case, not fight or flight. In the case of choosing between fight or flight, Joe decides to fight. And so he schedules a showdown. He trains with an instructor. The whole movie kind of revolves around watching Joe get ready for this big fight that he schedules because he wants to get even. He prepares himself physically, mentally, emotionally. The entire movie is about Joe becoming strong enough to hurt the person who hurt him. He wanted to return violence with more violence. And then the moment arrives, the day of the fight. The bully shows up. The bully's ready, expects violence. Joe's friends expect violence. Those of us watching at home, right, the movie, we expect violence. But then something unexpected happens. Joe doesn't run away. But you know what? He also doesn't fight. Joe stands his ground. And he looks his bully in the eye and he says, guess what? I don't need to fight you. You don't get to control me anymore. And then in that moment, because of that nonviolent resistance, the third way, which is probably more powerful than any other way, right? The power drains out of the bully. Because the thing is, bullies and oppressors, they rely on fear. They rely on reactions. Violence depends on participation. But guess what? Joe refuses to play the game. And I think in that moment's not cowardly. It's brave. It's defiant. It's the third way. And I love that movie so much because it is such a powerful thing for Joe not to fight. I think of the quote from Michelle Obama, previous First Lady. And she says, when they go low, you go high. Because it's not about meeting people, when you get bullied, the last thing you want to do is meet people at their level. You want to do something different. And I think we think back, Martin Luther King Jr. understood this. Gandhi understood this. Martin Luther King Jr., he knew violence only multiplies violence. He knew hate cannot drive out hate. So he marched, he protested, he went to jail. Not because he was passive, but because he was strategic. And, like that Gandhi saying, an eye for an eye makes the whole world go blind. And so what does this mean for us, my friends, at Harmony Creek Church? I think it means we're not called to be silent in the face of injustice. But you know what? We're not called to be violent either. We're called to follow Jesus into the third way. This way that resists fear with love, a way that responds to cruelty with courage, a way that believes another world is possible, and lives like it already exists. Jesus doesn't ask us to believe all the right things about him. He just asks us to follow him. And following Jesus, it means choosing courage over compliance. It means love over domination. This third way of not responding with violence to violence and maybe not turning around and just fleeing. The third way is not easy, but I think it's faithful. I think it's faithful. And it is how the resurrection, I think, keeps happening in us, through us, and in this world God refuses to give up on. I think there is something very, very powerful in this third way. Because it is a powerful way. And I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. I think about all the protests happening in Minneapolis. A lot of my colleagues are out in Minneapolis as we speak. And they're out there not throwing grenades and not being violent. They're out there simply just marching and maybe singing protest songs. They're uniting in love. Because that's a powerful thing. It's a very powerful thing. And I think about, what are we called to do as followers of Jesus Christ? We're called to follow in the way of Jesus, love in the way of Jesus, and it's not easy. But I think it means that we try to do our best to live out this third way. This way that doesn't meet violence with more violence. It also doesn't meet violence with us running away. We're not called to run away. We're called to engage the world as best as we can and make a difference. And we can make a difference without stooping to other people's levels. I think of, we had a training on I've been to some trainings on how to, nonviolent protests. And one of the things that people have done in the face of when people are protesting, and sometimes you have the police come and they have their things and maybe they're even throwing mace or tear gas and everything. But what I've seen is not not the protesters responding with violence. What I see is them. There's an example where people lock arms and just simply stand there, locked arms, not doing anything violent, and they lock arms, and then the police are like pushing in on them, but they refuse to let go because they're locking arms. And that's, I think, what we're kind of doing that right now. So the world is incredibly terrifying right now. But I think we're called to just hold on to each other and be an example of love as best as we can. So I think that is, I hope that this helped. We're called to live out this third way as best as we can. And so thank you, Laurel. I hope that I answered, I hope that this was a good sermon for you. I wanted to also, before I finish off here, I wanted to go ahead and give you some announcements. So I know it's ahead of time, but starting next month, starting on February 25th, I'm going to be doing a really cool thing for Lenten movie series. We're going to be exploring the themes of death and resurrection through Disney movies. And so you'll see a flyer that Bethany made for me. So we're going to start with the movie Big Hero 6. Then we're going to watch Turning Red. We're going to watch Toy Story 3. Then we're going to watch Zootopia, which Zootopia 2 you'll hear me talk about next week when I do my Sermon on the Mount series, because I just recently saw the second Zootopia. And then we're going to finish it off with the movie Coco. So I'm really looking forward to these movies. And with other announcements, because of the snow, we've had to reschedule our annual meeting twice now. So as of right now, barring no snow, February 8th will be our annual meeting, and it will happen after church. And then I have one more installment of my Bible study, the Genesis Bible study. So that's going to be this Wednesday at 6:30. Of course, barring no snow. And then my church hurt support group, as far as I know, it's still going to meet tomorrow, or still going to meet Monday, January 26th at the Dayton Metro Library downtown at 6 p.m. So I am still planning on having it, but we'll see how the snow is. And then next Saturday, January 31st from 6 to 8, we're going to have our game night. And then on the 1st, we're going to celebrate 3 years of sharing space with Good Shepherd. So we're going to have a celebration after church. There'll be cake and punch and good times. So the only thing you need to bring is you. All the other things have been taken care of. So I think that's about it. I know that the February 16th, I believe, the Wednesday before the 25th, that is going to be Ash Wednesday. So we'll have our Ash Wednesday service at 7, and we're also me and Pastor Mallory, the new pastor at Good Shepherd, we're going to be doing Ashes to Go from 12 to 2 and 4 to 6. So stop by. And if you would like Ash and you can't come on during those times or even come to the service, you can always let me know and I can come and bring you the Ash. So, and also, just because I'm thinking ahead, February 10th through the 15th, or February 9th through the 15th, something like that. Or February 10th through the 16th, sorry. I will be on vacation. And so Pastor Mallory at Good Shepherd has offered to provide emergency pastoral care should anything arise. And so, my friends, much love to all of you. And I know one of our beloved members, Rocky, would be okay with me saying this. I'm going to be officiating and leading her mother's funeral on Wednesday at 10:30 at Newcomer in Huber Heights. So if anyone would want to come and be there to pay respect and be there for Rocky, you are more than, I think that she would appreciate that. So my friends, thank you so much. And I really pray that you're all staying safe out there, and God bless you. And let us continue to find ways to be a people that can engage this third way, engage the nonviolent resistance, be nonviolent resistors. And let us just continue to be about love, because love is the best thing we do. Much love to all of you, my friends.